just wait. We'll just wait a couple of minutes just for the couple of stragglers that were coming in. So just bear with us for a second. Okay, we'll get started. So first of all, welcome everyone to the AFL Barwon Game Plan Educational Week, proudly presented by AFL Barwon and Leisure Networks, supported by Epworth Hospital, Corai Bay Health Group, Victor Sports and Xena Sport. Corai Bay Health Group are continuing to support clubs in the region and have announced that March 14 as the date for this year's trainers course. More details will be confirmed in the coming weeks, along with how to register, but for now, save this date and we'll share it with your club. I wish to begin by acknowledging the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin clan nations, the traditional owners of the land on which we are presenting from today. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land you are listening in from today. I wish to pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. The chat function, which everyone should be able to find, will be available throughout the presentation. However, I'll answer all the questions at the conclusion of the presentation tonight. The session is also being recorded, so maybe watch what you're eating or something like that in case you get a bit caught out with some food in your mouth. But yeah, we'll record it so we can upload it later at a later date. Tonight we have present Mel Taylor and Maddie Oakley from Netball Victoria, and Sophie Williams and Richard Black from AFL Victoria, and welcome them into tonight's session. Our session tonight is presented by the AFL Barwon operations staff and will present to clubs specifically regarding COVID-19 and the protocols and implications around it in the season 2021 and help equip members for the year ahead. This presentation will provide you with as much information as we currently have. However, we'll do our best to answer all questions, but we may have to come back to clubs. As we're all aware, it's a moving beast at the moment. Currently, with current protocols that both football and netball have remained as per they have prior to the 5-day lockdown. So we're still sort of waiting. So what we decided to present tonight is the pre-5-game 5-day lockdown that we've gone through. Because that's what's probably what we've got ahead of us at the moment. But and if we get to a normal season, that's potentially what it's going to look like. So I must clearly point out from the start of the presentation that all protocols and restrictions are determined by AFL Victoria and Sport and Rec Victoria. AFL Victoria and Netball Victoria are simply providing these guidelines specifically for the individual sports. Tonight's session is just to try and answer those questions, but also but we also have to present the information to you in a practical way. So I'll run through. I've got a presentation tonight, as you can all see. Yeah, so COVID-19 for community sport. So the topics that we'll cover throughout the night Will be the current football netball protocols, the club requirements to get started, QR codes, crowd and gathering limits, change rooms and what's involved around what's surrounding change rooms, cantines and social rooms, shared equipment, first aid trainer and primary carer, protocols and restrictions, some key resources, what to do, and return to play steps. So, as I said earlier, there's plenty of opportunities. There'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions, and we'll answer them as best as we possibly can. So currently, prior to the 5-day lockdown, football protocols, it was conducted outdoors. The patron cap of 1,000, which we'll get to shortly. The group sizes with up to the gathering limit of 100 people. Electronic record keeping is, and I'll probably touch on that again a little bit later, but I think electronic record keeping is certainly the way that we would prefer clubs to go. And then spectators to follow relevant gathering rules. So all this stuff you're probably fully aware of, but it's good just to reiterate, this is where it's at the moment, or was at. I'll move on to pavilions a little bit later. So for netball, again, it's very similar, maximum of 100 people per each group, plus coaches and essential support people. A netball court is considered as a space in a zone, and where a venue has multiple courts, more than one group can accommodate is subject to the venue density quota. But no, again, limits of 1,000 people at a venue. So the club requirements. Now, I'm sure for those involved at clubs, you would have already done this, or you should have already done this, but you need to develop a club's COVID safe plan in accordance with the Community Sport and Rec Victoria industry restart guidelines. So all these guidelines have got links. So all these presentations got links, which we will forward out to the clubs. But and there's the reference page at the end. But the biggest thing is to create your COVID safe plan in line with your local council and shire. But also there's some guidelines on Netball Victoria and AFL Victoria website around how to do it, and there's actually some templates that you can work towards to do it. Each club must nominate at least one COVID safe officer who has undertaken the free Australian government online COVID-19 infection control training. So again, what we recommended last year is that get as many people as your club to do this. It's not too onerous on the volunteer to do so, but it also, the more people that are aware of what is required and what restrictions are available, it certainly is going to help the club out in the long term to get through it and making sure you're following the right processes. QR codes. So AFL Barwon strongly recommends that the clubs use the Victorian Government QR code service. Basically what this means is that clubs, the owner, if there is an outbreak at a club, it won't be so onerous on a club to actually have to find all the paperwork, the score sheets, the team sheets, the written registers, the written records. What it would mean is that clubs would just go through the DHHS link that was linked to your QR code, and that would make it very easy. Now, obviously, we know that there'd be some people at Clubland that don't have a phone and stuff like that. But the opportunity with the QR code is you can log in for someone, and we certainly strongly recommend that clubs use a QR code. It also allows more people inside venues and spaces. As I said before, it was 2 to 1 if you were using electronic records like the government QR code, or it was 4 to 1 if you were using paper records. Sorry if I just disappear every now and again or mute myself, it's because I've got a bit of a tickle in the throat. My apologies. Clubs can use a QR code to solely log all participants and officials in attendance, ensuring it's accessible for all participants, excuse me, officials and patrons. Otherwise, a written register needs to be made available. What we suggest on a game day or a training session is all players and officials must sign in and scan in on match, or sign in and stand in on match days and training sessions. AFL Victoria is providing some posters for individual clubs, which I'll be able to display on their website. Around their club rooms and their facility. And one QR code can be used per venue for all football, netball, and Auskick. So rather than at a venue where you've got multiple users, if you can set it up, rather than having to have a different, so for example, I'll use a venue that might have junior football on a Saturday or Friday night, and then senior football on a Saturday morning, senior netball, or just senior and junior netball on a Saturday, and have Auskick on a Sunday. Rather than putting up different QR codes, if the club links them all to their one, that's allowable, and it'd be ideal. It'd make it easy for all the clubs and the volunteers. QR codes to be placed around the entire. So things that we think clubs should consider. Sorry, guys. QR codes are placed around the entire venue. Patrons can enter from multiple locations, e.g., gates, entry points, core flutes on fences, social rooms, toilets, any possible place that you can put a QR code up. We strongly recommend it. Any venue that's used for training needs to have a QR code set up and linked to the club. So, for example, if you're using a venue that you wouldn't normally play at, so it might be, say, Conowari as an example from a training point of view, you're required to have a QR code linked to your club at that venue for recording purposes. Crowds and gathering limits of 1,000. So, sorry, 2 seconds. So crowds for community sport will be limited to 1,000, capacity of 1,000 spectators, and will not increase for the 2021 season, is our advice that we've been given. Crowds limits are measured at any time of the can be measured at any time of the day, and if there are more than 1,000 people in attendance at any one time, that no more than 1,000 people can be in attendance at any one time at a venue. That includes football and netball. So at a venue like Spring Creek Reserve, where it's a pretty big venue, 1,000 people is still the capacity that you can have there for football and netball. Excluded from these 1,000 people are people who are necessary to be there to conduct the games or participation, and it excludes participants at that exact time. So, for example, if a player is playing a game, they are not counted in the 1,000 people or patrons cap. However, once they have finished playing the game and they might go and watch the sport or hang around for the footy or netball, they will then become a crowd number. So again, the density quotient of 1 per 2 square meters if you're using electronic records. There is an opportunity to apply for a permit. It's a type 2 permit, I think it is, where if your crowds expect 1,000 more, it's a public event permit, which will be considered from the state government and approved by the chief health officer. These permits applications take between 6 or 8 weeks. So these events will have to be granted a public event permit, have to be fully ticketed, requiring pre-sale tickets, and ticket holders must be seated or allocated in venue sections. There'll be a mandation of wearing masks if you applied for a permit, a public event permit. So that is quite onerous. We sort of thinking around where our crowds are for the year and what games. We potentially look at, there's probably 6 or 7 big ticket games that we envision may have an issue with patrons. In the past have had more than 1,000 people at those venues. But we sort of think that it's probably more a minority than a majority that would be the case. However, if your club does think that you are holding a marquee game and you are going to have more than 1,000 patrons, then certainly apply for the permit, the public event permit, but knowing that it'll be very onerous on the club to do so. Just things to consider when talking about crowd and gathering limits is that your role and responsibility is to manage the venue and follow the COVID safe guidelines and your COVID safe plan. it's not the responsibility of the club to kick people out of the ground. If you've followed all the protocols but suspect more people have entered the venue, you were to call the police and make them aware. So, for example, there's plenty of venues. We'll use a Geelong Football League, Football Netball League, for example. There's multiple venues where they just walk in people and you can't gate it, you can't ticket it, which we understand that may be the case. How do you control the crowd at those venues? However, if the club is doing the best possible job to manage the crowd or to manage the protocols and provide a safe environment for the spectators to be in, then that's all we can ask. However, if they do feel that the crowd is over 1,000 or significantly pushing towards over that limit, we would recommend they call the police, because as I said, it's not the club's responsibility to kick people out of the venue. Some other things is once a participant, as I said before, once a participant finishes playing, they become a spectator, must fit in the crowd limit. They plan on staying at the venue. Things to consider is attempt to spread the crowd out from usual standing areas. I know some venues, say for example McDonald's Reserve, where under the shelter there or under the pergola there's that's generally where the crowd stands. But under these protocols, they may have to spread out around the venue to keep the density quota there. And that's at every venue though. There's certainly every venue has a place where all the old people gather and watch the footy or the netball. So crowd limits exclude participants running the game, coaches and club volunteers. So people in the canteen, team managers, etc., don't count in the quota. Things if possible, have clickers on the gate to keep track of patron numbers if you have a gate. And if you have the ability to have entry and exit points where possible, that would be preferred as well. Other things around when you've got a gated venue is having pre-sale of tickets, and there's just 3 options there of some vendors that can potentially house ticketing for you. I'll provide this presentation to everyone after we're finished tonight. Change rooms. If the pavilion is part of the physical recreation complex, it can be used subject to physical activity restrictions, which include density quota. Limited access to change rooms for only players and essential staff is required. So I know historically, say in a football club, at the end of the game they win or they win or lose, and the rooms are full of spectators and supporters. So that, unfortunately, that can't happen in the current COVID climate. We can't allow it. Won't be allowed. So what we're suggesting, what has to happen is we need to make sure that that's not that parents, spectators, are allowed in their rooms, and we just have to make sure that that's mandated at the club. So that's something that the club can control. Signage must be displayed at the entrance of the club room stating the maximum number of people as per your COVID safe plan. Face masks to be worn indoor settings unless there's a lawful exception. So currently, under our current protocols or current government restrictions, we have to wear face masks. So, but that'll depend on the current restrictions at the time. Just things to consider: junior players arriving in apparel and playing apparel and not having to use change rooms. We know that was a precedent last year for the 3 rounds that we got off the ground. So certainly that's an opportunity. If you don't need to use the change rooms, don't use them. In all honesty, I know senior male footy and senior female footy and potentially senior netball may be required to use them if facilities permitted. However, I would just minimise the use of them as much as you can. Things like singing the song on the ground after the game, stuff like that. Although it may be historic, for this year, things are different this year. Canteens and social rooms. So sporting clubs can operate as a restaurant, canteen or cafe, but they must apply to the facility or restrictions that apply to the hospitality industry. Sorry. So to be really honest with clubs here, we're a little bit vague in the information we've got on canteens and social rooms. Whether this means meals and what can be served and what has to happen and how the quotas work in canteens and stuff like that. We're waiting on some information to provide to clubs. There's a link there around the hospitality and food and beverage section guidance page, but it's not very clear for clubs. So what we're going to do is, once we've got it, we'll provide clubs with a one page guidelines around how that looks, and what you can and can't do. At this stage, that's all we can advise, to look on that link and certainly go from there. But what we, thinking of cricket clubs and other sporting codes that have played over the summer period, that for example, if your club rooms can allow certain, if you can split your rooms into two rooms, it may allow you to have more meals across two different times or different venues, or so I think that's certainly something that we've taken out of from the cricket clubs as an example. But yeah, we're going to come back to clubs a little bit more on this. One thing that I did say preferred payment was cashless payments, which is hard when you might cost $2 for some lollies at the canteen or a chocolate bar, but that's preferred. It's not certainly the be all and end all, but it is preferred. As I said, scheduled meal times, and depending on your room size and the availability of it, and even this, if you've got a sponsor that's possible, maybe take your meals to one of your sponsors or one of your partners on a regular basis, and maybe you can get a chop out from there or a bit of a rebate from that. Shared equipment. So strictly no sharing of personal items such as water bottles, towels and food, lollies and fruit bowls. Playing equipment needs to be cleaned and disinfected between training sessions and games, which I'm sure you're all doing at the moment. Where modified rules are played, swapping of wristbands. So in Little League football, where they use wristbands, umpires, you can't share. You must have your own. So we thought that you could use one whole colour. For clubs with multiple teams, they might have yellow for one team, green for another, and red for another, as an example, where players can use the wristbands in that regards. No sharing of officials' bibs or training bibs, and no sharing of headsets, computer screens, or iPads. I know from a senior perspective, this may seem ridiculous, but players bring their own and label their own drink bottle as simple. We are dealing with adults here. I did have a gentleman who was a water carrier. He looks after the water at one of the clubs. He's a really nice fella. He just said that it's just hard for them to do it, but ultimately they don't really have a choice to do so. So players are responsible for their own jumpers and apparel. So if they don't rock up with their jumper, then it's going to look bad for them. But they certainly need to have control and take control of their own stuff. And the Chemist Warehouse safety kit. So this is a link. So this image here, Chemist Warehouse in partnership with AFL Victoria have provided a COVID safe order form and some stuff that you can order through Chemist Warehouse. They'll deliver. So we can certainly get that information out to clubs as well with this presentation. First aid trainer and primary carer, trainer must or should complete the COVID-19 infection control training. Again, with that link, medical officials must follow protocols outlined in the infection control training, gloves, face masks, etc. If you're using sports medicine staff who share medical equipment, must sterilise between use. Again, things to consider without, again, making it too onerous, but maybe not utilising the rooms and doing rub downs and strapping on the mat outside the change rooms if the venue's possible to do so. Just these sorts of things that, again, less just mitigating any risk. So, as I said, I'll email this out, but these are just links to everything you need that will give you everything you need to get to that we've spoken about. So whether it's the football protocols, the netball protocols, the COVID safe event plan, event permit applications, government QR code, COVID safe plan, the club COVID safe officer, and the current canteen environment and the infectious control training. So what to do? And I'm sure that the clubs have already done steps up to 1 to 5. Number one is create a COVID plan, complete the COVID safe training, create your government QR code, display your QR code in signage limits of venue, keep a training register. But the last one, and I'm sure it's the one that the clubs are most concerned about, and it's probably the most potentially maybe the most onerous that they may feel that that's the case, but is to follow spectator limits. So they're the 6 steps that honestly that we clearly believe are probably the most 6 important steps at the start to get them right. And then this is just some return to play steps. So support the club. Again, I know Daniel Andrews speaks it all the time, and we probably get sick of hearing it. But if you're unwell, stay at home. Promote safe hygiene. Wear face masks inside. Everyone brings their own water bottle. Check into the venue with a QR code, and maintain social distancing. So that's our presentation for tonight. I'll get to the questions. So if you've got any questions in it, we'll get to the chat box. So just give me a second. I'm just going to unmute the staff here just so they can jump in if there's any questions.
There's a couple in here, Sean, to go through.
Yeah, fire away, George. If you want, I'll just unmute it. Keep unmuting.
So one of the questions was if a club uses multiple venues, is it the same QR code that has been issued for the club? So that's correct. So if you as a club has set up a QR code already, you're able to add multiple locations. So we know that everybody trains at the same ground that they play in. So you'll be able to add in your other locations into that government QR code. And then we have another one just around opposition clubs signing into the home club QR code when playing away from home. Yes, you'll sign into the QR code that is allocated for that venue. So if you're playing away from your home ground, you would still use the ground's QR code because that's where you will be and where you'll be attending. What else have we got?
Sorry, I'm getting there.
Sally, in terms of the ground being at the caravan park, no, you won't have to take into consideration the holidaymakers. So essentially what the focus will be for club is the game itself, and your responsibility lies with following the protocols and doing your absolute best to manage people coming into that ground. If, for example, people wander in from the caravan park and you've done everything that you can to make sure that you're keeping the crowd limits under 1,000 like you have to, that's not your responsibility. What I would just suggest is potentially calling the local police and saying, look, we've set up our protocols. We have somebody in place at the gate to monitor people coming in and out. However, we've noticed some people have wandered in from the caravan park. So that's the best way to go about it. We know that it's not an ideal situation, and really all we're asking from clubs is just to do your absolute best in following the protocols. And yeah, that's all we can really do.
Sorry, George, just the wristbands, Mike, for under, are we going to use wristbands for this year for under 9s and 10s? What we're suggesting is we can either go without them, or each player has one, and the only players that play through that midfield would use them. That way it distinguishes them.
Mike, we'll get some clear comms out about that coming into the season, but we got some mixed responses on how that worked last year, so we're trying to get a happy medium there. So we're looking like we'll use maybe just the midfielders have it and there's just one set colour, so make it easier for coaches and umpires to differentiate when kids go into different regions.
Just got Mel Taylor here from Netball Victoria. She just wants to say something. So Mel, I've just unmuted you here if you wanted to speak.
It was just to, so there are a few key points in particular in the past we've had questions from other leagues about the COVID safe plans. Knowing that we've got footy and netball all at the same venue, there's no requirement for the netball club and the football club to submit 2 separate COVID safe plans. It's just one, and you can choose to use whichever template, but use the templates because they're partly pre-populated. If you've got because there will be requirements to the netball guidelines, which are very similar. There's not many, if any, differences between football and netball. The requirements are the same of both sports. So just use those templates and cut and paste from one to the other to make your lives a lot easier. And then there is a requirement within there that if you're expecting over 500 patrons at a venue, which clubs are more likely to get to 500 than to 1,000, then you need to publish that COVID safe plan on your website just so that it's accessible. So just a reminder for clubs to do that as well. And just with the indoor spaces, make sure you are making that really clear and measure all of your indoor spaces separately. So each of your change rooms, each of your amenity blocks, your canteen, and just make sure that people are aware of how many individuals you can have in those spaces, just to keep it all legit. We know that indoor areas carry higher risk, and all we want to do is create the safest possible environment for our patrons as possible. And I would just encourage clubs to start at a high level. You know, if you start with really high expectations of your patrons, and if the expectations are the same, if I play at Queenscliff, I know what I'm going to experience. The same as if I go to Drysdale, you know, down to using the same QR codes. It's quite easy to manage that way. You don't have to try and work out new information for every venue that you're attending. But if you start at a really high level, we've noticed even at Friday night netball, then things drop after every week and people get a little bit complacent and, oh, I won't sign in this week, or sorry, I forgot. If we start at a higher level, then we can just drop as we go, but we're not starting at 50 and dropping to 20, we're starting at 100 and dropping to 80. So keep those standards up really high. We know that things can change on a dime. And we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can to keep our players and our volunteers as safe as possible.
Thanks, Mel. We'll just get back to the questions quickly. If council has approved indoor and outdoor use, do we have to resubmit? No, if it's been approved by council, then that would be fine. Ultimately, they are responsible for approving these things, so that wouldn't be an issue. Is the playing ground still out of bounds? E.g., can the kids kick the footy on the ground between the senior breaks? As far as I'm aware, Shane, and I'll have to confirm this, but I'm pretty sure the latest protocols outline that there weren't to be spectators on the ground during the breaks. Again, something must be hard to police, but certainly we'll confirm that again with the ones that we get a bit more clarity around some updated protocols, but I'm pretty sure that was in the last lot of protocols. Fran, as far as the trainers that go pre-game, what restrictions are on taping and rub downs? They just have to clean the equipment after every use, and then they have to wear a face mask and have completed the COVID safe training or the infectious disease training protocol, training session. Will there be increased intervals between games for cleaning? At this stage, we haven't foreseen that at this point, but it's certainly something we're not ruling out at this point based on the bit more advice we're willing to get. And so once we've got a bit more clarity on that, we'll be able to advise clubs. But at this stage, it's probably senior male football. It's probably those times will probably remain unless we're told differently, but maybe with junior footy we can allow a bit more time because there'll be people coming in from different clubs that potentially around the time. Do you need to redo the COVID safe online training each year? That's a really good question. I'll confirm that. I think you would only have to do it once, but I'll certainly confirm that. We've had some concerns from senior players about the use of change rooms. If they had to use a full clean expected between groups. So that's a really good question, Georgia. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that one.
We can find out.
Yeah, that's a good question. A good call. Sean, would you advise clubs to use additional booth licenses to serve alcohol, avoid having people inside social rooms? I think that's a great idea and a great point. If you can certainly spread the load of people from a canteen and from a bar, I think that's a great idea if you can do that and have the resources to be able to do that. To spread the people out around a venue is a really good way to to be COVID safe, and certainly would appease those the restrictions and the density limits. Rob, with limits inside social rooms for game presentations, will it be scrapped and incoming generated with income? The limits will be what the council and the government put in place, Rob. So once you've done your COVID safe plan, you'll have an understanding of how many you can let in your rooms at that point. Unfortunately, that's what we've been advised that's going to be the case. Whether it may impact on revenue, but it will just depend on the venue and what their limits inside can be. Can we have Auskick on the ground at half time? I will have to confirm that as well. I'm not sure if that's the case. Something we can come back to.
Just quickly on all of this, everyone, I know that there is obviously going to be a lot of questions and things are changing daily, as we've all seen. We will do our absolute best to always answer your questions, but there are just some things that we aren't sure of at the moment, and we have to wait for further government direction. As Sean said at the start, this isn't an AFL Vic and a Netball Vic or an AFL Barwon policy or procedures. This is coming directly from the state government, and we're just trying to make life as easy as we can for all of our clubs to make sure that we can get some people playing. I know that there's obviously concerns, Rob, you raised it around income being potentially lost with restrictions. At the end of the day, we really want people, the state government want people playing sport again. And that's the main priority for the year, where we think that we've put some things in place, like reducing the salary cap for this year to assist clubs in not being, in financially dire positions. So again, we'll try our best to work through everything with everyone. It's always news to us every single day too. There's always a new update, but we'll all keep you on the loop and do everything that we can.
And I think there's some, the Friday night netball comp has been running really well for the part since towards the end of last year. And I think there's a lot of learnings from that as well. So share that information amongst your club and work out what's worked well and what hasn't worked and what you've needed to tweak along the way. There's a lot of people at Cardinia Park on a Friday night, and for the most part, people are really compliant. If you're really clear in your messaging, if you're really clear in what the expectations are from your club, then people have been really good at being compliant. They understand that there's a safety concern and they're towing the line pretty much. We've also seen that if you have a really clear role and a role description, or if you've just got a little task for someone to do, then volunteers have been coming out of the woodwork. And they're happy to do something just so that their kids can play sport again, and they're out and about and they're talking with people they haven't talked to for a long time. So just that social connection is so vital, and we know the massive role that footy netball clubs play in that social connection. We want to make sure that that's not lost in all of this rules and regulations and restrictions, that we still get to enjoy footy netball on a Saturday and whinging about the cold rather than whinging about wearing masks. So we really want to bring that home. And if you do, as a club, go through the list of extra roles that are going to be needed to be done and call out for people or tap people on the shoulder, and they have been willing to step up if it's just something small that they can do. And maybe just a quick point, Sean, you mentioned before about canteens and restaurants. Yeah. You encourage everyone to read through the industry guidelines for hospitality, but I think there are some things that just naturally carry more risk. And you mentioned cash before. It's not that cash is not allowed. You can still take cash, but there's extra risk that's carried with that. So you just need to put some additional things in place to try and manage or alleviate those risks. So having disposable gloves available, maybe having someone in the canteen just to collect money and then other people to serve, and they wear gloves, regularly using hand sanitizer, putting out those 1.5 metre markers so that so there are definitely some things that you can do to try and help alleviate those risks. You just need to do a little bit of thinking prior to round one in order to get there. And we understand that that's on your shoulders as club representatives, but pull some people in that can maybe help you with that conversation and draw on those people that have experience with it.
Belinda, I see your question just around canteens. again, I totally understand that it will be hard, if not impossible, for the 1.5 metre distance. But as long as you have reiterated to your club that that's the expectation, and you have signage up around the canteen, or even marks on the ground where people should be standing, at the end of the day, that onus comes back on the individual to make sure that they are also following the rules, and that's all you can do. We're not asking you to go out there with a ruler and make sure that people are that distance. So we understand the concern, but as long as you are doing everything you can, that's all we can ask of you.
I think, George, that probably just goes into Aaron's question then, where he said, would it be fair to say that it comes down to the best that the club can do and be as compliant as possible to the guidelines? That's exactly all that we can ask. And that's probably perfectly answered yourself there. So coaches, Lee's just asked coaches to address the players on the ground, not in a confined area, address areas. Look, in a perfect world, Lee, that it would be ideal. However, that may not be practical in some occasions. However, you would just have to apply to stick to the density limits inside the rooms for addresses. That would be what would have to be asked upon and what you have to follow. So, Sarah, coaches, trainers, primary carers mandated to wear masks during the game. Under the current protocols, they would be. However, that may change. But yeah, currently I am pretty confident I've read before that they have to, but I may just confirm that. Sorry, Fiona, as a league, as AFL Barwon looked in sourcing hand sanitizer, cleaning products and masks in bulk to have accessible to clubs to purchase at a better price than ones we buy at the counter. So Georgia has developed a partnership. George, do you want to speak about that one with the sanitizer?
Yeah, we actually did this last year. So all clubs have been sent that information that we do have a partner providing hand sanitizer at a cheaper rate. If you'd like to hear more, Fiona, get in touch with me and I can assist you and connect you with those people.
The other one's the Chemist Warehouse promotion, which we'll send out, that they actually they'll be able to provide some stuff to clubs, which is probably cheaper than some of the over-the-counter stuff that you may be providing. And that probably answers Belinda's question as well regarding sanitizer and PPE required. No, don't be sorry. If there's any, keep firing the questions through. We're willing to go for another 15 minutes. Yeah, feel free to fire them through. The other thing is whether it's Sarah, Nathan, Michael, Georgia, or Emily or myself, we're more than happy to take your questions through offline and throughout the week. We'll try and answer them as best as we possibly can, just to sort of help you guys out. So, but yes, don't hesitate to send us an email or give us a call. Sorry, Michael, just wanted me to unmute him. Didn't say Michael Lim Limmy, sorry, so I didn't know who you.
All right, mate. Thank you. Just, I know there's a lot of questions that people are raising about logistics for match day, which is quite fair and reasonable. And just to, I guess, allude to the fact that there will be a president's meeting occurring shortly in the next week or two, depending on the restrictions, face-to-face, where clubs will have the opportunity to have a bit of information share, because some people have got some really good ideas on ways of getting about this. Some have done it before, as Mel said. There's some associations have been there. I'd like to hear from some of the cricket associations with, they've got a few different ideas, but certainly at that session we'll be able to hopefully flesh out some ways that clubs can approach this in the best possible way, bearing in mind, as was said before, that it's really just making sure that you can do the best you can without having to physically kick people out of the venue. But just be rest assured, and if you've got any concerns or some of the questions that haven't been answered tonight, probably just maybe put them to the president so they can bring them up when we have that information sharing session. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Lemmy. Shelley, no, you don't have to keep a written attendance if the players and officials use the QR code. So that the QR code can be your attendance, register of attendance, and that would be our preferred way. Just the only thing I will say is that potentially junior players may not have their phones with them at training and stuff like that. So someone would need to be plugging that in on their behalf at a training session. But yeah, certainly our preference is to use the electronic record keeping. It'll make it less onerous if anything happens. And yeah, there had to be contact tracing completed.
As Sean pointed out, we have quite a number of links directing you to the information that you potentially have questions about. So our recommendation will be make sure you read through all of those links in terms of protocols and what you can and can't do. And then if you still have further questions from there, of course, reach out to us and we'll be able to help. But those links will always be your first point of call and the most up to date.
If there's no more questions, thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Sean, can I jump in with one more thing?
Of course you can.
That's not COVID related, but while we've got 89 clubs online, it might be good to all club representatives. The state government, as part of the response to COVID and the impact that it's had on participation, will be releasing the Active Kids voucher in the next couple of weeks, potentially the next week. So anyone that between the age of 4 and 18 who lives in a low socioeconomic area determined by their postcode, or parents with a healthcare card will be entitled to a $200 voucher to support participation in sport. Now we know any incentive to get kids back on the field will be a bonus, or back on the court will be a bonus. So look out for that information. It's based on a reimbursement process. So parents need to sign up for their membership or buy new footy boots or new netball shoes, any equipment or membership, club membership or SSA membership that's required. They just need to keep the receipts and then apply through the state government portal that will be released in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for it and jump on it because it's going to be really highly sought after. You might have seen the regional Victoria tourism initiative where you could get some vouchers to travel into regional Victoria was snapped up so quickly. So keep an eye out for it and get that information out to your families as soon as possible.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, as I said before, if there's any other questions, feel free to come to any of us operations staff. We'll email this out we'll email it out to everyone who RSVP'd and we'll send it to the clubs. It'll also be housed on our AFL Barwon website post this session. So thank you for your time. It's going to be a different season, but I think our main goal, and that's the reason we're all in here, is just to get some football and netball back playing and ready to go again. So appreciate everyone's time. Remember that there's another session following this one, which Sarah would have, if you hadn't registered for, you probably got about 10 minutes to do so, but we've also got 2 more sessions throughout the rest of the week. So certainly, if you haven't already, sign up to the others. We've started the week pretty well, and yeah, hopefully the clubs can get something out of what we're presenting. So appreciate it. Thank you, and no doubt we'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Thanks all.